Okay, everybody. I believe that the last time that I did a video on an MCU project was way back when Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness came out. Um, I was gonna do a Moon Knight video, but Moon Knight just hurt my feelings, and I didn't feel like talking about it. And since then, I saw Thor: Love and Thunder. Ooh, Thor: Love and Thunder, and I saw Black Panther: Wakanda Forever. Um, I didn't want to talk about Thor: Love and Thunder at all because it made me upset, and I don't know. I don't think I was particularly moved enough by Wakanda Forever, and the things that I would have said wouldn't have exactly been new because my problems with Wakanda Forever run deeper than just the movie, and it's more with the connotations of what comes from the things that happened in that movie. So I decided not to talk about it. Um, I don't think I've seen any of the shows since. Oh no, I watched She-Hulk. I like She-Hulk, but my relationship with the movies and the MCU as a whole has been waning over the last couple of years. And before we get deep into talking about Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, I would like to point out that 2 years ago, I did a video about Phase 4 and how it's just not really been grabbing me, and it's felt directionless and aimless, and I just don't really understand what we're doing here. And everybody in the comments of that video was lampooning me as if I didn't know what I was talking about. Now, since then, the general consensus has been that exact same sentiment. A lot of people have been saying the same things I was saying, and I feel like an insane person now. But all that being said, I've consumed quite a few MCU projects since the last time I talked about one, and now we're at Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, and this is the one where I really feel like I need to talk about it. We're gonna go full spoilers. I have a list of notes here about the movie that are not exactly in chronological order of how the film goes, but they're just things that I thought about while I was watching the movie and afterwards that made it difficult to enjoy and get attached to this film, and also creates problems for things that came before and things that will be coming after in the MCU. So again, spoilers. If you haven't seen the movie, don't watch this video. But if you have, I'm sorry. We'll get through this together. So the first thing that I want to talk about is when they're in the quantum realm, after they drink the goo of... I've learned that his name was Veb. I don't think they ever said that. But they drink the goo, and then suddenly, everybody in the quantum realm speaks more or less how any other person in the MCU would speak. They have that same type of Rick and Morty, really trying to be witty type of humor, but you're just kind of like not interested in anything anybody has to say because they're all smartasses. Um, and that got really old after about 7 seconds of it, because it's just like, why would they talk and act like this? It just, you never really get an understanding as to what the culture is in the quantum realm, and that's a problem we'll come back to later. Um, Another thing that really bothered me was the rules on shrinking are really inconsistent, and this is a problem that's been around since the first Ant-Man movie, so I won't blame certain things on Quantumania. But one thing that we do know from the first movie is that even while being shrunken, Scott and Hope and Janet or Hank or whoever is shrunken can still hit somebody just as hard as they would be able to full sized. But because the surface area is reduced, that hit lands with more impact. That's why he's able to knock dudes straight out when he's shrunken in the first Ant-Man movie. But suddenly in this one, you can't hurt anybody if you're shrunken and you hit them. That's new. That's new. That defies Ant-Man, Ant-Man and the Wasp, and Captain America: Civil War. Um, Really not something that I like. Also, this popped in my head. Why do they always take their mask off to talk in this movie? It just makes it seem whatever. It makes it seem like the stakes aren't that serious, right? Like Kang is here, his forces are here. He's here to capture Scott and Cassie, but they're just taking their mask off in the middle of having a conversation and everything's fine. I'm like, okay, whatever. I guess they don't take anything too seriously in this situation, even though they're trying to do the multiverse. Another thing is that this aspect of the film felt very Deus Ex Machina with the ants showing up in the final act to help defeat Kang, because when they were going into the quantum realm, the ants got time dilated and lived what did Hank say, like 1,000 years in a few minutes, and so they built a super advanced society, and they have tech, I guess, that's either on par with or better than Kang's. But that time dilation did not affect the humans that went into the quantum realm. Another thing, well, let's talk a little bit more about that time dilation thing. Remember the last time Scott was in the quantum realm with No Way Out? He was in there for what felt like 5 hours for him, but it was 5 years out in the real world. Scott says in this movie that they've been down there for what feels like a day. Does that not translate to 24 years in the quantum realm? Or in real life? Like, I think it would have really been interesting. It could have been devastating for the audience if they finally escaped the quantum realm, but they are way in the far-flung future. They are in a future that has already been taken over by Kang after the events of the upcoming Avengers movies, right? And then we'll get around to this, but I think Scott should have died, and it should have been down to Cassie. Like, well, my dad was able to save people by going back in time. Let me try that. You know, like you would think something. But then again, the rules of the quantum realm have always been really inconsistent because, Janet was aging while she was down there, but Scott didn't. Um, there's also the fact that Scott was able to just grow out of the quantum realm the first time he went down there, and either Janet never tried that or it just didn't work because she was in too deep. But she didn't think about doing it before she was in too deep, and Scott didn't try it again the second time he was down there. It's just the way that shrieking in the quantum realm each work continues to change from film to film, and that's really annoying. But it's the most annoying in this one, especially because of the quantum entanglement concept from the last movie. You would think that because Janet and Scott got their wires crossed due to Scott having been in the quantum realm in the first movie, that sort of thing would continue to happen. That Janet would have quantum entanglements with just about everybody that she encountered when she was down there. That's not something that comes up. Um, and by the way, this isn't like I rewatched the Ant-Man movies recently to like find things to like nitpick about this one. I just remember these things from seeing Ant-Man and the Wasp 5 years ago and Ant-Man 8 years ago. I haven't really watched these movies since they came out. Um, these things are just I just hold on to them. Um, Another thing, Kang has seen what like infinite timelines play out, and he's destroyed however many timelines and universes and stuff. Which we'll get to the words timeline and universe eventually. But he got jumped by some ants. He hasn't seen the timeline where ants were really advanced, and they beat him up. Like, I don't know. Also, next thing, everybody's treating Scott like he's gotten too big and like too egotistical to be around his friends and his family and stuff. But that's just not true. Because this whole plot starts at a family dinner that it seems like was Scott's idea. Because he likes being around his family. So I don't know why everybody's lampooning him and treating him like that. Just because he's not out there holding up a sign and freedom fighting and protesting. That's really unfair to Scott. All because he wrote a book about his life. And he's found some success, and now everybody just thinks that he's an asshole for it. Like, okay. Wow. I don't really know why that is. Next thing. We've had about 3 hours of Kang at this point, and we still don't really know what his motivations are, especially considering the fact that we're going to be dealing with multiple Kangs. Like, Thanos shows up. Okay, Loki shows up, and he's pretty much the big bad of phase 1, right? And we know right away what he wants. He wants to be king, he wants to rule, he wants what he feels like he was denied due to the nature of his birth and his raising. His upbringing, rather. His birthright, he sees, is being king, and that's all he really wants. That is consistent from the first Thor movie to Avengers. And it kind of continues to be consistent into Thor the Dark World and Ragnarok. Thanos shows up, and yeah, they changed his motives a little bit from the comics where he's not obsessed with death anymore, but you see him and it's like, okay, he's going to be finding the Infinity Stones and putting them in a gauntlet. This much we know right away. Kang I don't know if he wants to balance the multiverse or stop other people from messing with time because he thinks he's the only one that should be messing with time, or if he thinks that what he's doing is just in some sort of way. He explains his motivations and like, but he doesn't explain that. And Janet sees the things that he's done, but she can't see his reasonings in his mind. It's just, it's like, if we're gonna do I touch the thing and I see your memories, why can't you see a memory of him deciding why he wants to do this in the first place? You know, that would go a little bit of that would go a long way. I just don't understand. Um, Next up, let's talk about Luis and Kurt and whoever the hell Ti plays in these movies. Them not being there really sucks the soul out of it being an Ant-Man movie, because one of the things that gives Ant-Man its personality is, first of all, Edgar Wright's DNA is still all over the first Ant-Man movie. If you weren't aware, Edgar Wright, the director of Baby Driver, Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, Hot Flush, Shaun of the Dead, World's End, all those movies, he was supposed to do Ant-Man, and they got pretty deep into pre-production before splitting up. And Edgar says he really wanted to make an Ant-Man film, but they didn't want to make an Edgar Wright film. But there are traces of Edgar Wright's like humor and style and witticism still strewn throughout that script, and it somewhat spills over into Ant-Man and the Wasp. The key thing that I'm talking about being Luis and how he explains things. That is like the best part of the Ant-Man movie, is when he's talking about how he heard about this job. And it comes around again in the second movie when he's been truth serum and he's explaining everything that happened between Scott and Hope in the first movie. But Luis is not in this film, so we don't get one of those sequences. That's one of the things that makes an Ant-Man movie, and it's not there. Another thing that really makes an Ant-Man movie is that at its core, it's a heist story that is also about family. And yeah, this movie is about family in a lot of aspects, but the soul isn't there. And it's really upsetting. And you would think that because Scott clearly feels guilty over how much of Cassie's life he missed while he was in the quantum realm for 5 years, but that doesn't come up as much as it should. But Cassie sure lets you know how angry she is at him for missing that time, even though it's not his fault. You know, he wasn't really around for Thanos. He didn't find out about Thanos because Thanos was only on Earth for a couple of minutes before everybody got wiped away. So he really get a chance to do anything. But like that family, I don't know, that message of family togetherness just doesn't feel like it's there as much as it should have been. And this isn't a heist movie. It's a get from one place to another, shrink a thing down, and then fight. It's like, okay, sure, whatever. And when I talk about getting from one thing to another, that's actually segue into my next point. There is no frame of reference for how far away from each other the characters are in the quantum realm. We can tell that Cassie and Scott land a pretty good decent distance away from Hope, Janet, and Hank, but we don't know how far that is. And when I bring that up as an issue, I want to compare it to Avengers: Infinity War. You know that when Iron Man and Doctor Strange and Spider Man are in space and they're headed to Titan, you don't exactly know how far away Titan and Earth are from each other, but you know they're not getting back to Earth in this movie. So the Avengers are going to be split up this entire time, and it's harrowing. It creates more tension because it's like the Avengers are not assembled. The Guardians are here, some of the Avengers are here, the rest of the Avengers are here, some more of the Avengers are down here. It's like you're going to be fighting this battle on multiple fronts because you're split up. If you're going to be splitting the party, you need to feel the weight of that. But we don't know what the hell the quantum realm looks like or what it really is. So all we know is that the characters are a distance away from each other, but apparently a distance that can be covered by flying a ship for a little bit off screen. They just kind of reunite suddenly, and I'm like, found him, I guess. And I get it. Obviously, Janet knows where the thing is that, or like where the ship core is, so she can guide them how to get there. But it's not like she ever says, "Oh, it's on the other side of town," or "It'll take us forever to get there," or "We need to move now," or whatever. It's just like we're gonna get there, and then they're just together again for the rest of the story. And I'm like, all right, that's fine. I don't know how far away his citadel is from where they landed, but seems like a far enough distance for them to need ships. But I don't know what that means, you know. I also want to talk about Kang for just a little bit. He's so powerful, and he's killed Avengers before. He mentions Thor, so we have to assume he's killed Thor, but he can't kill Ant-Man, and he's like really trying to, and he just can't do it. He's blasting away these freedom fighters in one hit, but he shoots Ant-Man with the same type of blast, and he just lives for some reason, you know? And another thing is that he's never really gonna feel as menacing or intimidating or imposing as Thanos did if he's gonna continue to die every time he shows up, right? And you can say, sure, he's probably not dead, he just shrunk down even further into the quantum realm's quantum realm. But the other Kangs, who I assume are pretty smart, are under the impression that he's dead. So that's what I'm gonna be operating on. Which is really upsetting because, like, if this is the Kang, like the Kang that the other Kangs couldn't defeat, so they had to trap him somewhere, and he goes down to Ant-Man, I'm not really interested in Avengers: The Kang Dynasty. Because yeah, Loki got beat by Thor in the first movie. But it's also like, you find out that he survived falling into the abyss, and he's going after the Tesseract, so it's like, well, he wants something for some reason, and we're going to be dealing with that in the Avengers movie. Also, the very first Avengers story has Loki as the villain, so it's like, no matter what, I'm sure they'll find a way to make this make sense, because this is thematic to how it's supposed to be and how it was, right? Loki is a big threat, so once you find out he's still alive, it's like, okay, game on, cool. He didn't get jobbed by Thor. He actually fought pretty hard and did decently well. And also, this is Thor we're talking about, the God of Thunder. Not a guy who used to work at Baskin Robbins who just stumbled upon a suit one day. You know? Because it's funny how smart Cassie is in this movie, being the daughter of Scott Lang and Scott Lang's ex-wife. Because Scott isn't exactly a genius, right? So I'm not sure where she inherited this brain from. Scott is just, I mean, yeah, he has a degree in electrical engineering, but he never appears to be intelligent in the movies, apart from when he comes up with the idea to do the time heist in Avengers Endgame. But it's also like, anybody with an Ant-Man suit could have come up with that, probably, if they went into the quantum realm and realized the time was dilated. Anyway, but yeah, it's like, if Kang just continues to get killed off and jobbed every single time he pops up, like Harrison Wells, I'm never gonna care about him as a threat. And that was something that I was saying about the multiverse forever ago, is like, stories are going to start to lose their impact and their sense of stakes and drama if it becomes so much like the comics, where it's like, oh, this big story that happened actually has no impact because we now have time travel, or we can just go to another Earth and pull this same character from another universe, give him a new face, same character, boom, we have another Iron Man, boom, we have another Black Panther. Because I promise you, they're going to use the multiverse to bring Black Panther back in either Avengers: The Kang Dynasty or Secret Wars. Black Panther will be there. And that's what's upsetting to me is, oh, you didn't like this story? It doesn't matter. It took place on this Earth. It doesn't actually have any impact. Or okay, let's compare it to Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. The advertising campaign used Mordo a lot because we know that at the end of Doctor Strange, Mordo makes an enemy of Strange and Wong and the entire rest of the sorcerers, and he wants to rid the world of sorcerers by stealing their magic because they're using it improperly. So we know that the next time Mordo and Strange meet, it's going to be a big deal. But actually, this is a completely different Mordo from another universe who's never met this Strange, and their story is beginning now. And yeah, you can infer that there was some beef between Mordo and Strange in this universe because of Strange using the Darkhold, but that does not translate to this Strange. They fight over the pettiest shit ever. Strange is just making fun of him to goad him into a fight, and he fights harder than I've ever seen anybody bite some bait in my life. And then you find out that off screen, Mordo and Strange had several fights where Mordo was trying to kill him. But it seems like we're never actually going to see that because we have multiverse stuff to do now. We can't follow up on threads from the Infinity Saga. We're in the multiverse saga now. And that's where we're at, and that's where we're going to be. The multiverse is going to continue to hurt the MCU the longer it goes. Anyway, the next thing I want to talk about is the pacing of this movie. It doesn't really feel like it has three acts in the story, right? There's not really a beginning, middle, and end. What there is a really long middle, because I think that they get sucked into the quantum realm too early. And that may seem strange to say, but it really is that way. You don't really, because we still aren't getting a sense of what the world was like between the snaps and how it is for regular people or anything like that post snap. And Scott is the most regular Avenger you can get, but instead of trying to see how his life is adjusting to being post snap, it's he's a best-selling author and he's really popular, he's really famous, everybody loves him now, even though, I mean, I guess people will probably know that he's the reason that people came back in the first place. I'm sure that story has been told, but it's like, I don't know, we don't really, it's just like, oh, I'm living a great life. Now I'm in the quantum realm. And so much of the time that's spent in the quantum realm is just faffing about, waffling, talking about nothing, doing nothing. The story is not moving forward most of the time that you're in the quantum realm. In the final battle, feels like it's like 45 minutes. This is not an Avengers movie. You don't need to spend that much time on the final battle. Final battle of Spider-Man No Way Home is about 20 minutes, right? And another thing is the philosophy regarding the midpoint. If you're not familiar, the midpoint of a story is supposed to mark a significant change. Like, this is where, the first big plot twist happens, or like this is where the tone shifts. And to give you some MCU examples of really good midpoints, Spider-Man No Way Home. The midpoint of that movie is Norman turning into the Goblin and killing he kills Ant-Man. That's a really important midpoint. Midpoint of Captain America: The Winter Soldier. You find out that S.H.I.E.L.D. has been Hydra this whole time, at the 50% mark. What's another really good midpoint? Oh, okay, we'll do the first Thor movie. Midpoint, Thor tries to pick his hammer back up and realizes that he can't. Really big moments that are important for the characters or for the plot. And you can usually tell when you're at the midpoint because it's like, oh, this is a really big deal. Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania's pacing is so jacked, I have no idea what the midpoint is. My guess is that it's when Kang betrays Scott's deal, or betrays the deal that he had with Scott, but it feels like there's so much more movie after that. Like, nothing feels like it's around the 45 to 55% mark through the timeline of the movie to identify it as a midpoint. I'll have to find out what the midpoint was when it hits Disney Plus. Like, the pacing is just so bad. It's just a really long second act and then a final battle, and we're done. We're done. I also want to talk about Kang and his deal that he made with Scott, because I talked about that just a little bit. At the beginning of the movie, you find out that he made a deal with Janet, like, hey, if we fix my ship core, I'll take you home. It'll be like you never left, nothing. I'll just drop you right back in time where you were left off, and I'll go do my thing. And he is adamant about honoring that deal, even after she finds out the truth about it. He's like, please let me take you home. He's a man of his word at that point. But for some reason, he betrays the deal that he made with Scott, because all Scott cares about is his daughter being safe. And he's like, I got the core for you. I shrink it down. I've done my part. Where is my daughter? And then Kang is like, oh, well, she'll be fine without you. And I'm like, what are we doing? I thought you were going to help each other. Why did you just suddenly change up? Why are you no longer a man of your word? Why are you no longer a man of honor? And for some reason, Scott is really upset about that in like a very specific way. He's like, our word is our bond. Without it, we're nothing. I'm like, where's this coming from? You've never acted like this before. You okay? Scott, you good? Are you feeling all right? But it's really annoying, honestly. I don't know. Kang is just really inconsistent because he's so powerful that if he were to just fight Ant-Man for a little while, he'd kill him. But it's like, oh well, I need to bring my entire new empire that I've made. I need to bring that with me, so it buys Scott more time to catch up. And oh, we need to keep him away from the rings. Why not you just go keep him away from the rings? You can zap these dudes into non-existence in one hit. Go handle Scott yourself. Why do you wait until after everything's gone to shit and you can't escape with your empire anymore? Like what are we doing? Why do you need to bring your new empire with you if you exist outside of time and you're timeless and you can just make a new empire in an instant, in literally moments? I don't like. I feel like an insane man for feeling this way, but the things that are said just don't add up with the things that happen on screen. Um, but I also want to talk about the rules of the multiverse. Really, okay, let's talk. First of all, let's talk about the stakes of this movie. Ant-Man is not a guy that you want trying to save the multiverse. I am a firm believer in characters fighting in their weight class. And examples of this rule being broken that come to mind immediately are Suicide Squad, the other Suicide Squad. As much as I like the second one, they were still fighting above their weight class with Starro. Um, and now you have this one. Now there are characters that can justifiably save the world or save whatever. Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, I do think is a bit of a stretch to have, you know, Spider-Man trying to save the multiverse, but it's a very specific way to do it. It's just if I shut down this machine, everything's fine. Spider-Man has shut down so many machines in the comics, it's acceptable. This one though, if Kang escapes the quantum realm, the multiverse is at risk. Scott, you cannot let that happen. This is Kang the Conqueror we're talking about, dude. What is Ant-Man supposed to do? I'll tell you what he's supposed to do. Get jobbed like he was getting jobbed until the ants showed up to help. And yeah, it's Ant-Man. Of course there are going to be ants in the final battle. But like, why do the ants have different time rules? That doesn't make any sense. How they just popped up like that. It was like, okay, sure. They have that. But like, if you look at the first two Ant-Man movies, maybe the country was at stake. It's like, well, if the Ant-Man tech gets out, then it could be a really big deal in the first movie, so you stop the Yellow Jacket. Second movie, it's like, really, we just need to get Janet out of the quantum realm, and the FBI is chasing us, and these guys that want the hidden particle tech are chasing us. But it's a very short scale, very small scale story when you really think about it. This movie, multiverse is at stake. That's a lot for Ant-Man to be trying to do pretty much all by himself. Because if we're being honest, even though this movie's called Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, the Wasp accomplishes both jack and shit in this movie. She helps him shrink the thing, and then she shoots him with some beams at the very end. And that's her involvement in the script and the plot of this movie. She's a title character. She has just about nothing to do. Like, are you kidding me? But if we're talking about multiverse stuff, right? How do all of these Kangs intend to avoid causing incursions if they're all going to be in the same place? Because as we learned from Doctor Strange of the Multiverse of Madness, if a being from one universe is in a universe that is not their own for too long, it'll cause an incursion that risks destroying one of the two universes or both. And there's already questions about that because it's like, well, why doesn't America Chavez cause incursions every universe she goes to since she's the only one of her kind, and she's obviously constantly in universes that are not her own. But all of these Kangs are in universes that are not their own. You know, and yeah, the TVA can avoid that because it's like a neutral zone or whatever. But even at the end of time where they put everybody, which is I guess some sort of composite universe where they drop everybody, they should still be causing incursions. And Kang in this movie says that the Kangs are causing incursions, so obviously it's still a thing. But I would like to know how these are supposed to be prevented. Anyway, it, the multiverse rules are so inconsistent from one project to the next. It's actually really upsetting. And the worst thing that they did when setting up the multiverse was refer to alternate universes as branch timelines. Because let's talk about that for a second. They use timeline and alternate universe as concepts and completely interchangeably, and that's a problem because it retroactively changes the concept of time travel in the MCU. So now, when you look at the time heist in Avengers Endgame, They weren't going back in time. They were going to alternate universes that were at that point in time. And yeah, that kind of lines up with the fact that they were creating branch timelines by removing the Infinity Stones. But now we're getting into many worlds theory, where if you do something, it creates a whole new universe. Like every decision you make creates alternate universes where you made those different decisions. But they say that by returning the stones to where they came from, they can clip those branches and erase those universes, or rather erase those timelines. But if we're talking about alternate universes, it shouldn't be that simple. It because now we're dealing with quantum causality, right? And it's like, well, I mean, sure, it makes sense that they're universe hopping and not time hopping, but they are able to push time through Scott Lang, as they say, or as Tony says in Endgame, because they turn him into a baby, a preteen, and an old man. So obviously we are dealing with time, but you cannot know if we're talking about a timeline or an alternate universe the way that they talk about these concepts completely interchangeably. Because in the comics, Kang isn't really a multiversal traveler, he's a time traveler. And yeah, you have a Council of Kangs in the comics, there's a bunch of Kangs that are in one place at the same time, but it's through time. It's through alternate timelines. Because the way that Marvel Comics have always worked, and even DC Comics have kept this consistent, multiple timelines can exist within the same universe, right? Like Barry Allen, or not Barry Allen, but if Doctor Doom were to go back in time and prevent his mother from being taken to Mephisto's realm, that doesn't create Earth 617. It creates an alternate timeline within Earth 616. If the audience is ever going to have a hope of keeping track of this timeline multiverse gobbledygook, we need to get that straight quickly, because it's very confusing as a viewer to know if we're talking about time or space. It's not the same thing. They are relative, they are related, but it's not the same thing. Kang in this movie says he's going to burn the other Kangs that betrayed him out of time. Burn them out of time. I don't know what that means, but it sounds like he's erasing them from history, not destroying universes. But it's not something that they can keep straight, and it's really, really annoying. Now, moving on. What is the point of keeping Ant-Man alive? What is he going to continue to do for the story? You know, he's not special. The PIM technology is special. You know, Hank had just as much role in saving the universe after what Thanos did as Scott did, because he created the technology that was used. But if you want to show how big and strong Kang is, have him kill an Avenger. Have him kill somebody. Thanos killed people, you know? Hell, even Ultron killed a fucking Avenger, and Kang can't do it, I guess. Yeah, that makes sense to me. You want me to believe that he killed a Thor, but he can't kill Ant-Man. Sure. Next up, next up, let's talk about what Scott needs to do in this movie, which is shrink the ship core. It is presented as a huge challenge. You know, the longer you're down there, the more your mind will come undone, the blah 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 blah. And he splits into a bunch of different timeline versions of himself, and then he just shrinks it and it's done. That sequence takes about 5 or 6 minutes. And it is like the main thing that he needs to do. Like, it is the only shred of DNA of a heist that's left in the Ant-Man movie, and it's resolved quicker than the conversation that led to getting trapped in the quantum realm in the first place. And that's really something. That I love I love when the entire plot is contingent on doing this one thing, and that one thing is just super simple. And it just makes you wonder why the movie is nearly as long as it is. Um, but sure. Next up, why doesn't Kang harvest Pym particles from Yellow Jacket's suit when Darren shrunk down there? If he knows he needs Pym particles to escape, I'm sure there are still some in Darren's suit, because they worked. The suit worked, right? There's still got to be some in there. Or why didn't he, harvest any, or like try to capture Scott the last couple times he was in the quantum realm? or grab Hank when he was down in the quantum realm, you know? But especially Scott after Ant-Man and the Wasp. He was down there for 5 years. And he just Kang just then he it feels like I'm an insane man. Or at least he could have said something about like tried to find you the last time you were here, but I couldn't reach you. Or something. Anything. Dude. And this is a super minor nitpick, but if it's like if he sought out Ant-Man specifically because he knew he needed the pin particles, why on earth? How could he possibly ever think he was talking to Thor? He's like, "You're not the one with the hammer, are you? You know who this is. You brought him here specifically." And sure, it's like, well, maybe he's just posturing. He's trying to scare Ant-Man. Doesn't need to. I think the Force telekinesis technology he was using a couple of seconds later does a pretty good job of that. It just makes Kang seem so foolish, which everything he does in this movie seems really foolish. It's really upsetting. And then overall, this movie just really feels like a Star Wars prequel, where there's just a bunch of CGI nonsense all over the screen at basically all times, and nothing ever feels like it has any stakes or weight because it's all just CGI nonsense. And there's a bunch of characters whose names I'll never remember ever. I'll, even no matter how hard I try, I'll never remember. Veb is the only one that I remember, and it's because Twitter told me. Twitter told me that that guy's name was Veb. Then I also want to talk about the fact that Janet got like quantum realm powers from being there so long. Because if you remember, you know, Ghost's whole thing is that she needs quantum realm energy or she will destabilize and die. But she also has like she 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 has sensory overload from experiencing like multiple timelines all at the same time. But Janet was able to take that away from her. Like sure, she still needs quantum realm energy to not be destabilized, but the experiencing all of that, she took that away. But Janet doesn't seem to have any quantum realm powers anymore. I don't know what happened. I don't know what happened to that. Also, quantum realm is the most visually uninteresting thing in the MCU when it comes to like being another place, which is really upsetting because like Wakanda, Asgard, Talokan, even in the Dark Dimension, they all had they all have visual aspects that make them all distinct and interesting and memorable. Dark Dimension, Quantum Realm was just things, you know. It's just green screen. It never I have. It doesn't help that it looks wildly different every single time you see it. I think it looked the coolest in the first movie. Um, but whatever. Then why did Kang even make MODOK? Like, what is the point of making MODOK? What does he do that your regular goons and androids and whatever the hell can't do? I it's just nothing that happens in this movie makes any sense, and it's so upsetting because it really could have been good if the third Ant-Man movie was just about Scott trying to repair the damage done to his family by being absent for so long, and also trying to keep the Pym particle technology from landing in the hands of AIM. Because what are the last two Ant-Man movies about? Trying to keep the Pym particle technology from falling into the wrong hands. That's all this needed to be. But no, we gotta complicate things way beyond necessity. And what you end up with is a very disjointed mess of a film that just makes you feel like your intelligence has been insulted when you're done watching it. And it's another MCU project that I've seen and will not be seeing again. All that being said, and it's crazy because like I feel like a crazy person because I said a couple years ago that it felt directionless. It felt like it was without focus. There was no roadmap. There was no path forward because of the sheer volume of MCU projects that there were in 2021 to 2022 compared to how many there were in all of the Infinity Saga. Right? There were like 15 projects in Phase 4. It took 2.5 phases to get to 15 projects in the Infinity Saga. And by that point, we knew full well where we were going. We knew what the goal was. we're only just now finding out that the official plan is to do the multiverse saga with Kang as the main antagonist. But it doesn't feel like they wanted to really do that because, like I said, the rules of the multiverse are so inconsistent from one project to the next. Not to say that there wasn't stuff like that in the Infinity Saga. I highly doubt that the ether in Thor: The Dark World was supposed to turn into a regular stone that was the reality stone, because it doesn't seem like it has reality affecting powers in Thor: The Dark World. I think it just made Malekith stronger. But whatever. And I don't think that that Loki's spear was supposed to house an Infinity Stone, much less a Mind Stone, which glows yellow, but for some reason in the little case that it's in glows blue. Because that makes Thanos seem kind of silly. Why would you give Loki the Mind Stone and expect him to bring you back both the Mind and the Space Stone? Right? It seems silly, but it's not to the point where you can't keep track. You can't continue to follow the rules. But the multiverse works so differently every single time you see it. We're talking about incursions now, right? Well, what about the fact that because Doctor Strange was in Earth 838 for a couple hours, and Reed Richards was like real worried about an incursion happening. But what about Spider-Man: No Way Home, when there are what, 8 people in universes that aren't their own for like 2 days and nothing happens? Or consider the fact that now Vulture, who is an MCU character, is stuck in the Morbius dimension. He's stuck in the Morbius universe, trapped there with no way back. Are we not crossing over to Incursion? Well, that's Sony. I don't give a shit. Okay? Because the Michael Keaton Vulture was introduced in an MCU movie. Yeah, that's a Sony movie too, but like, this is the thing that happens, especially when you have multiple studios fighting over it, but multiverses get really complicated really quickly. And this is just unfortunately a really boring multiverse that is extremely difficult and complicated. And I don't like it. I don't like it. Losing my voice. But so we're gonna wrap up here. But yeah, that is what I think about Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, and almost half the length of the movie itself. Goodness. I'll see you guys later.